Hi, this is Liliana Partida, the nutritionist at Center for New Medicine. We're going to be talking about some foods that are going to help to support your immune system and are going to boost your vitality. Now, of course, you cannot go wrong when it comes to organic. You've got to go organic because all of the pesticides and herbicides are basically estrogen disruptors. And again, whenever you have a compromised immune system, you want to take the load off rather than allowing more load to come on. So again, our intention is to go as whole and as natural as possible. Think about it, if it looked like it came off of a bush or a tree looking like what you're going to eat it, then that's probably a good resource in regards of good phytonutrients that we're going to have. So honestly, to put it in a nutshell, you'd say have a green salad with lots of live enzyme in there, whether you've got cucumber and jicama and radishes and celery and all kinds of different types of lettuces. The greener the better. Then you're getting a lot of great chlorophyll. And to that, we really want to add our proteins. Now, whether they're vegetarian proteins, and again, when we're dealing with our immune system, we don't want to over acidify the body. And so for patients who want to continue to eat meat in their diet, then it has to be pasture raised. And again, if patients can't afford to have pasture raised meats, then I say it's better to go to a vegetarian, vegan diet, because again, we're looking at the overload principle that caused the situation in the first place. It's not any one thing, it's not any one food. It is considered an overload. The body was not able to cope. And I always tell patients that it really starts in the mind when there's too much stress and emotions that we are not able to recover from. What does the body do? It ends up trying to, if there's no more space in terms of our mind and overload, it brings it down into either one of two things. One being an autoimmune disorder or a tumor. And so peace of mind is really important. So I want you to really understand that when it comes to your diet, let's have peace of mind about this. Let's not go into orthorexia, which is kind of the new term of being so paranoid about what you're going to eat that, oh my God, this is going to feed cancer. Shouldn't eat that, and have this level of guilt that comes over you. Now again, if it's in its natural state, you can kind of rest yourself assured that it's going to be good food. It's good God's food. Now of course we have category of what we call superior foods and then inferior, even when it comes to these beautiful green leafy vegetables or other colored vegetables that are loaded with a lot of carotenoids and antioxidants and biflavonoids. So kind of what you want to think to yourself, the more fiber the better. Because when you've got a lot of fiber, you're able to feed the friendly bacteria in your gut, and the gut is where it's all at. When you have good gut health, you've got good immunity. And so many people, because of the fact that they're eating stored grains with a lot of aspergillus and fungus on them, which create mycotoxins in the body. They're eating a lot of packaged foods, things with a lot of chemicals, that their body again is disrupting the friendly bacteria in the gut, and they're ending up with lots of allergies that they never had, and oftentimes we would look at as a leaky gut syndrome. So again, I want you to have the mindset that if food is coming in its natural state, there's no bad food. It's just the amount that's on my plate according to how much glucose I should consume. Now think about all foods from the plant kingdom turn into sugar. Those foods that I'm speaking about, as far as the salads and the vegetables on the green side, are highly alkaline. Most of these foods I can actually eat raw in a salad. So I'm getting the live enzymes and the water in them. The water, in all actuality, really supports our lymph system along with those minerals to help for the electrical conductivity of the body that's so essential. At the same time, you want to think about low sugar foods as really covering 90% of what you're consuming from the plant kingdom. So let's think about those superfoods. Think of all of the braca family, which is going to be your broccoli and your all of your cabbage and your asparagus isn't really, but it's incredible for the kidneys. But all of the cauliflower and my mind went blank on me for a moment there. But all of the cruciferous vegetables are not only great to their vitamin K and to their vitamin C, but they have sulforaphane in them. And that helps to detox any kind of estrogens in the body. And that's really important for the liver. And so I was thinking of Brussels sprouts. That was the one thing that was not on the tip of my tongue there. So wonderful foods that we could have, and of course I like to see them in their most natural state, so steaming them is going to be the best way to do it. Now the ones that are really bitter and green, those aren't going to have the high sugar, so if I want to roast them, you could go ahead and put a little olive oil on them, throw them into the oven. What you're going to realize, let's just say if you put cauliflower and broccoli and asparagus in the oven with a little olive oil, and you had a full tray going in, when you took that tray out, it would be a half a tray of vegetables. Why? Because it excreted liquid. Now anything that shrinks is potentially going to shrink some of the problems that you might be having with your blood sugar, with fungus or any kind of mycotoxins in the body, because sugar feeds these opportunistic organisms, including cancer. So when foods shrink, I say it's going to shrink your problems, and that is going to be a good thing. So again, grilling them and having a little bit of what I call a grilled darkness to them is not going to be nearly as detrimental, because nobody would agree that any kind of charcoal on meat is good. But again, it will not be as detrimental as a potato that you grill that's very high starch, because that high starch and that heat creates acrylamides. So if you want to grill, let's just do just the green family, and the bitter family is going to be your best bet. And a lot of times this is really nice because I can create a variety of different vegetables and grill them and put them in the refrigerator, and then I can have them the next day in salads, and it makes it just a lot easier to prepare for tomorrow's meal. Now at the same time, we do want to have some color. Besides the vitamin C and the vitamin K and all the phytonutrients and the chlorophyll that we're getting from these green foods, we need the carotenoids, we need the beta carotene, we need all of the antioxidants in the bright colored pigment of different vegetables. But then again, we say which ones are going to be more beneficial than other. So we love carrots for their beta carotene and the beets for their nitric oxide. And then butternut squash is just a wonderful replacement for yam. Now we do think yam has its place and it's wonderful, but again, a very small amount adds to a lot of sugar very, very quickly. But can we use it? Absolutely. Steaming it's going to be better. I usually tell patients, cut it into 8 pieces, steam it, take 2 pieces off, chop it into 4 pieces each. Now you got 8 little segments that you throw into a salad, and you've got the little sweetness that it offers and the fiber that it has, so it moves very slowly into the bloodstream, but also the texture of that creaminess that we so much love when we're having any kind of a tubero, potato, and or yam. So again, the more fiber in it, the better, and yams being very high in alkaline. So we do use them, but again, in a smaller amount than even that we would use a butternut squash. But again, it's nice to be able to have something that you can feel full on. So that's why I always say butternut squash is a good alternative. At the same time, spaghetti squash is absolutely fantastic too, because it can serve as a pasta. And so what are some of the kind of backlash I get from patients when I put them on this diet is they say, oh my gosh, I have to give up my breads and my pastas and all these things that culturally I was so used to having and I so love and have an affection for. And I say, well, not entirely. Let's just convert things that look the same but don't have the same amount of sugar. So spaghetti squash works terrific, miracle noodles terrific. So there's so many choices right now that you can do that you can buy in the grocery store. And they're very accessible now because everybody is on what we call a keto craze. Now again, our intention is to lower the sugar as much as possible because we know that cancer thrives off of glucose, and it's not really particular on what it has to utilize for its fuel. And of course, it's not only using glucose. I mean, we do know now that it can break down and utilize ketones too, but it's very difficult. So it's always going to go for the easier foods, making it a more friendly environment for it to continue to proliferate. So our intention is to make it an uninhabitable environment so that we can get the body back into homeostasis. So when we look at things that don't shrink, like the carrots and the beets, and the yam and the butternut squash, then we know that they're very high sugar. So I tell patients no more than a half a cup to the maximum 3/4 of a cup at one time, and only one on your plate at a time. Let's add color to the plate. It's got to look good to us, and that rainbow really kind of gives us a variety of all the nutrients that we're looking for. But I tell patients no more than one, and don't let it be the main event of what you're consuming. Now, when it comes to the grains, and especially because of the way they're stored, and the aspergillus, which turns into mycotoxins, Of course, when you cook a lot of these things, it does break a lot of this and destroy these mycotoxins. But the bottom line to these is that they've got a lot of glucose once you actually ingest them. For example, 3 cups of broccoli is going to be the equivalent to 2 tablespoons of rice. It's not that it's a bad food, and it does have its place, feeds the friendly bacteria in the gut, helps the body to produce B vitamins. But again, what we want to say is how much can we eat in order to be satisfied and full. Now, millet, probably one of the better grains, is more on the alkaline scale, and even basmati white organic would be even a better choice, because oftentimes quinoa and the ones that have the high fiber, which we were all led to believe were so fantastic, are not fantastic for all people because of the lectins in them, which are a protein that can cause some inflammation to the gut. And so in all honesty, I tell patients, if you're going to use these foods, use them as a condiment in things. If I'm making a soup, a couple tablespoons of millet in that soup or into a salad, that it becomes more of the texture than the main event. So it's not as if these foods are bad, it's just that in order for us to have a sense of satiety, we want to have a full plate. And again, if you've got a couple tablespoons of this and that, you won't even feel full. The brain won't get the message because it didn't take us a long enough time to eat and for that fiber to expand into the gut. So grains are not our favorites, and when it comes to putting a protocol together to support the immune system. When it comes to beans, a lot of patients, we have them on vegetarian or vegan diets for various reasons. And so they become more of a staple in a patient's diet. But once again, we want to make sure that we prepare them in a way where we break down the lectins, where we can actually make them more digestible because they have phytic acid that doesn't allow for their full absorption and or the minerals. So I tell patients, by emergency, you're going to have a can of beans in your, cupboard. By all means, eat that rather than something that maybe isn't on the protocol of a healthy protein. But you want to really make them yourself. You want to sprout them by putting them in water, at least overnight, with maybe a tablespoon or 2 of vinegar, so that that vinegar breaks down the phytic acid in the beans. Then the next day you just dump the water out, put them in a pressure cooker, because a pressure cooker takes it up to a high heat to deactivate those lectins, which are going to be a much more usable fiber. Now, oftentimes patients are definitely going to need a digestive enzyme because of the fact that we really have, we don't have the enzyme to break down beans as much as we'd like to think we do. And this is why so many people have reactions of feeling bloated and gassy after that. So a good plant digestive enzyme would be fantastic, or one with a little bit of hydrochloric acid would be good to have alongside of your beans. But once again, these beans, remember I said anything that doesn't excrete water or that is sweet in nature is going to be high sugar. So a bean doesn't excrete water, it swells up. So anything that gets larger than its original state is going to have more higher sugar as well. So, but the beautiful thing about beans is they've got a lot of fiber in them, and so you can deduct that so that it becomes a less impact to your blood sugar. But I tell for women about a half a cup of those sprouted beans on a salad or in a soup that's got a lot of low sugar vegetables like celery and onion and spinach. Those are all a great kind of combination so that you have a sense of satiety, because face it, everybody wants to enjoy their food. And I'm all about creating a taste and a ritual experience when we eat. We don't have to give up flavor. We just have to have a swap out for the glucose that we're consuming in regards to the amounts that we're having. So when we look at fruit, for example, it's got a lot of great antioxidants in there and a lot of vitamin C and the beautiful different colors and pigmentations of the high auric value, which is antioxidants. But then we say bitter better is always going to be lower in sugar. So you can't go wrong with berries. So whether they're blueberries or blackberries or raspberries or cherries or strawberries or camu camu or goji berries, again, we want to just say how much can we have. And so in the morning when you are not exposed to insulin because you haven't eaten anything, that's probably the best time to have those berries, preferably in a shake. And then that way it can be a complement to my whole meal, because fruits move very quickly out of the GI system. In fact, they usually take berries probably about 20 to 30 minutes. So if you eat them alongside of animal protein or even a grain, they're going to have to stay there a lot longer until that food that you consumed with it digests. Could be anywhere between 3 and 4 hours. which causes the glucose to ferment, further giving you an environment for candida and gas. So I say fruit either with a plant-based, I like fruit salads. What does that look like? It looks like a beautiful baby greens and some pine nuts and some hemp seeds and a handful of blueberries. That's what I consider a fruit salad. And these can be had for breakfast. Why not? I have many of my patients that have a nice green salad with those hemp seeds and pine nuts and fruit and with nice salad dressing. They love it. They're very satisfied, and they're getting a lot of their great chlorophyll and vitamin C and all of the phytonutrients that are so important when we're trying to boost our immune system up. So fruit does have its place, but we can't be munching on fruit throughout the entire day. So you kind of want to say as soon as you eat fruit, your body has to produce insulin. Insulin is the vehicle that's going to transport those calories into the muscles, and then whatever is left over gets stored, goes to the liver and then gets stored in fat cells or in your blood. And so I want to keep it down to just as low as possible. And at the same time, if I have to produce insulin to transport these fruits into the cell wall, when I'm under the influence of insulin, I'm not burning fat for fuel. And that usually takes about a 3-hour period. So if you're at all about creating ketones and energy that cancer has a really hard time breaking down, you don't want to snack with fruit in between your meal. You want to think about eating every 4 to 5 hours. So when 3 hours after insulin's out of your blood and you get this signal it's time for a snack, then rather than reaching for a fruit or some other carbohydrate or even some protein, which also needs the insulin to be shuttled into the cell wall, think of fat. Think of a little handful of nuts. Think of a half of avocado with a little bit of Himalayan rock salt and a little bit of lemon juice, something of that nature, or celery with some almond butter. So again, if we keep the carbohydrate content very low, insulin won't have to be stimulated, and you can continue to make ketones in between your meals that will feed the metabolism in terms of its energy, also give you brain clarity. So we try to utilize that keto adaptive mindset in between your meals and also while you're sleeping. And so often I have my patients do circadian rhythm eating from, let's just say, 12 to 6 o'clock at night, or 7 in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or finishing their dinner at 6 o'clock and not eating till 1 o'clock the next day. This is really very beneficial because it allows the body to source out fat that it has stored and utilize it for fuel. And so when I've got less time that glucose and proteins are in my blood with insulin, then it forces my body to function on a fuel that cancer has a very hard time utilizing. So it's really a great thing. There's nothing that brings down insulin levels in your blood better than fasting. And so I'm very keen on fasting, whether it's circadian fasting or whether it's going on a water fast for several days and allowing your body to break down all of those dead cells and really kind of support detoxification. And instead of having those cells that are kind of like cement now, creating more wet cement, allowing them to be more permeable, allowing your nutrients into the cell wall for energy. So I'm a big proponent of intermittent fasting or circadian rhythm fasting or fasting in general. It increases the mitochondria, the white blood cells. So why wouldn't we do that? It's really not that hard. And so again, this is something that I think all of you should just give it a try. You are your own personal experiment. Only you know best. I can tell you all day long until I'm blue in the face, but until you have an experience of it, do you know if you can do this and make it a part of your lifestyle? One of the things that I tell patients, because they always say, well, how do I know that my body can utilize this sugar and not create more surplus for cancer or for candida and stuff? I say, well, if you have a suspect meal, that maybe this meal you had sweet potato or you had something that was a little higher in carbohydrates, maybe take a little glucose meter and prick your finger about 45 minutes after you've eaten a meal. And for about 45 minutes, your blood sugar starts to go up, but it's not at its highest peak, which is at about 1.5. I wouldn't want to do it then. And you wanted to see the rise that it's moving. It should be about 100 and below. If you've done a good job in keeping the glucose down enough so that the cells can allow to shuttle that into the cell wall. So you become your own scientist. I ate this and my blood sugar went up to 125, so I either have to cut it in half or I have to remove it from my diet for now. And as you begin to be more receptive to insulin, utilizing your energy better, then there may be a point where we are able to add a little bit more carbohydrates to your diet. Now, another thing that we want to put into consideration is that anytime we are thinking about food and we're looking at our plate as mostly of it is green, we've got to balance it out with protein. Now, one of my favorite superfood protein is hemp seeds. I love hemp seeds because 3 tablespoons is almost the equivalent of 2 eggs. You don't have to cook it. You just have to get it out of your refrigerator. I keep mine in the refrigerator because it's a good omega-3 essential fatty acid, and that way it doesn't go rancid. So a lot of times I'll put 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds, a couple tablespoons of pine nuts that are more fat and kind of more satisfying, along with my vegetables, roasted vegetables, or even a little bit of blueberries. Now I've got a great vegetarian meal. Now again, I might have that beautiful salad, and I might have a half a cup of lentils on my plate. And that also lentils can serve as a high sugar food to a low sugar food like a salad, but also the protein as well. Now, again, for those patients who want to eat animal protein, then I say really once a day probably is a good balance so that we don't over-acidify the body, along with that beautiful chlorella-rich green salad is going to be awesome. And so it needs to be pasture raised. It really only needs to be about 3/4 of your palm, and the thickness as well. So once a day should be fine. People say, well, how much protein do I absolutely need in order to survive? And protein is absolutely essential. We need it to survive, but it doesn't necessarily always have to come from animal. And so really we'd say what we do is you take 0.8 or 1 gram of protein for every kilogram you have. And how we calculate that is just take your weight and divide it by 2.2 with those calculations. So if you kind of would look at it a little easier, you'd say anywhere between 15% of my total calories I eat up to 25% would probably be a good idea. And so, if you're looking at anywhere between 3 and 6 ounces of protein, you're going to be doing all right. Preparing it and cooking it in a way where you're not frying it and creating more, I would say, toxins in the meat, right? People love that charcoal on barbecue, but again, they're carcinogens. So I say baking, broiling, steaming, crock pots are all fantastic. Because at the same time we want to prepare these meats at low heat, and we also want to, a lot of times if we marinate them with either an apple cider vinegar or lemon juice, it also supports when the composition of cooking these amines, so that they don't become more what I call a free radical in the body. But again, we just pair it up with a nice green salad and kind of complement that to support the liver and being able to break these down. Now, fat is absolutely essential too. And again, so one of my favorite animal proteins is going to be fish, because it's high omega essential fatty acids, which really our body and our nervous system is composed of 60% good essential fats. So we have to have them for our hormones. And fat doesn't make us fat. It's the sugar and the excess of protein that ends up with triglycerides in our blood and excess body weight. So the good essential fatty acids from your mackerel and your sardines and your salmons and your small fish. Now, of course, we want to have wild, of course, and we don't want to have farm raised fish because again of the antibiotics and the feed that they use for them. So again, the wilder is always going to be the better. Even when it comes to meat, the wilder the better. So when it comes to red meat, we'd say fish is going to be more superior, but if you're going to go with a red meat, think of buffalo and bison and lamb before you think red meat. Think of Cornish game hens before you think of fish, and before you think of turkey and chicken as well. So the wilder the better. And again, if you just think palm size, we're going to be looking pretty good. Now, for those of you who aren't eating meat, which is loaded with B12, you might consider using things like amino acids or spirulina or chlorella, which are fabulous superfoods. We don't have enough iodine in our diet, and this is why so many people have thyroid dysfunction, because we're not getting enough iodine, and the salt that we have is not an iodine that our body can use. So I love using sea vegetables, and I love using dulse and kelp, just as little things that you can put onto your salads. And again, spirulina and the greens are wonderful. I say sometimes, people love juicing, but it can add up to a lot of sugar really quickly. And so a lot of times I say, get a superfood, get a powdered superfood. You can see right here, this is only 3 carbohydrates. And if I'm going to be drinking water, why not have something that's loaded with chlorella, spirulina, all the cruciferous vegetables, the cauliflower, the broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, the sprouted greens? Why not? It makes it really easy to do, and we're getting very, very low carbohydrates. So to put it in a nutshell, what you want to do is you want to look at your plate. 3/4 of it should be green. It should be bursting with vitality. It's got water in it. It's got enzymes in it. Some I have cooked so I can break the cell wall down for easier digestion. Some is raw to give me enzyme. Then whatever protein I choose, a complementary protein. And again, if it's animal, no more than once a day. And then the other 2 being vegetarian meals, along with our really good, nice a little bit of grass-fed butter or ghee over our vegetables, or olive oil. We want to make sure that we're using only the good fats. No fried food at all, because again, that oxidizes and ends up using our free radicals. So again, my favorite's going to be avocado to cook with, and coconut oil, and then to just have over my salads or saute very lightly is going to be the virgin olive oil. And then again, I like to use hemp oil in my shakes, or macadamia nut oil, or flax. So those are all fantastic, good essential fatty acids that will boost your immune system, giving you that omega-3 that is so essential for your brain. So think natural, think organic, and think green.